The hearth nobody noticed in the grand thunderclapped halls of Mount Olympus, where gods bickered with the volume of crashing waves and egos inflated like overfed peacocks. There sat one figure who did not shout. You might overlook her at first. She did not fly or wield lightning. She carried no trident, no bow, no lyre. Her chariot was a simple walking path. Her stories, when told, were usually left out of the main dramas. But there she was, Hestia, goddess of the hearth, the firstborn of Cronus and Rhea, and curiously the first to be both swallowed and later spit out again by her father. A detail she never brought up in conversation. You see, Hestia's domain was warmth. Not the roaring fire of battle, nor the wild sparks of invention, but the quiet, perpetual glow of the cooking fire. And that was her legacy. While the other, Olympians roared across the sky or prowled forests and oceans, Hestia tended to the embers at the center of every home. This might not sound particularly dramatic. And it wasn't. Her temples, often simple, were found in nearly every village, marked not by grand statues, but by the communal fire that never went out. People would gather not to sacrifice goats, but to light new torches for their own hearths, carrying her warmth back home. It was said that no feast began without her name, and no offering was complete without a whisper to Hestia. There were no scandals tied to her, no whispered infidelities, no strange mortal offspring left on doorsteps. In fact, Hestia swore a vow of eternal virginity. When both Poseidon and Apollo proposed marriage, she declined politely and retired early. Zeus, perhaps out of respect, or perhaps because she was the only one, not trying to usurp his throne, granted her a permanent seat by the central fire. On Olympus, she didn't use it to lecture or fight. She used it to keep the kettle hot. Her presence was calming. Even Hera, queen of drama, seemed quieter near her. Demeter would sit beside her in the evenings, bringing olives and bread. Sometimes Hermes would drop in, fresh from delivering something to someone, and talk about how fast he'd been. Hestia would nod, smiling, tending the coals. If you're wondering whether she ever raised her voice, there's no record of it. There was, however, one curious tale. A time when, for a brief moment, the eternal flame almost went out. It was during a quarrel between Ares and Athena over a matter now lost to history. Perhaps a spear design. Perhaps something less noble. The scuffle grew into a full skirmish. And in the chaos, someone knocked over a brazier. The flames flickered, embers scattered. Silence followed. Everyone turned to Hestia. She did not scold. She did not raise her hands to the heavens. She merely knelt, gathered the coals, and calm as a temple cat, breathed them back to life. The gods, for once, stayed quiet. Why was Hestia so often forgotten, yet so central? Was it simply that warmth is only noticed when it's gone? Or was it that the most enduring power on Olympus was not thunder or love or war, but the soft crackle of home? A goddess without temples. You've probably heard of Athena's Grand Parthenon, Apollo's sunlit oracles, or the marble halls where Zeus received libations and bulls. But Hestia, goddess of the hearth, never demanded such things. She had no famous mountain shrines or colonnades carved in her name. Instead, her temple was the home itself, every home. In fact, and her altar was the cooking fire at the center of it. This made her strange among the gods. While the others sought attention, Hestia seemed to quietly vanish into the background of everyday life. Not out of shyness, but by design. In ancient Greek homes, the hearth was sacred. Every family kept a flame burning, not just for warmth and cooking, but as a divine presence of Hestia herself. It wasn't unusual for the first thing a new colonist did upon arriving at a new settlement to be relighting the hearth using embers from the mother city's sacred flame, symbolizing continuity, community, and divine protection. Even when people moved, married, or migrated, they brought Hestia with them in the form of a coal or an ash bundle. You might imagine her as sitting in the middle of a bustling kitchen, sleeves rolled, hands dusty with flour, keeping the stew from boiling over. Not regal, not warlike, but necessary. This omnipresence in the everyday was something her fellow gods found confusing. Once, Hermes, always curious, asked Hestia why she never left Olympus to cause a bit of spectacle in the mortal world. She smiled. Because they never leave me in the Greek household. Hestia presided over the Prytaneon, the communal hearth in the center of the city. Every town had one. It was where guests were received, where oaths were sworn, and where justice was declared. The flame of Hestia burned there continuously. If it went out, it wasn't just considered a fire hazard, it was an omen, even at great feasts and public ceremonies. Her name was the first invoked and the last honored. But she never asked for sacrifices of animals. A bit of oil, a handful of barley, a few words. There's a dull, almost clerical precision to how these rituals occurred. The hearth had to be cleaned a certain way. The fire relit at dawn. Bread offered at dusk. Quiet, repetitive, peaceful, just as Hestia preferred. Still, not all was perfectly calm. In one obscure fragment attributed to an Athenian priestess, there's a brief mention of a fire that was allowed to go cold during a particularly chaotic period of war. Soldiers had been quartered in the hall. The coals were kicked over, the room repurposed for strategy later. When the enemy was defeated and the fires relit, the priestess claimed the city, breathed again. Was that poetic license? Perhaps, or perhaps they really did believe that without Hestia, civilization was just a camp. There are also faint traces of her in funeral rites. It was customary to carry a torch from the home's hearth to the tomb, a final reminder that even in death, warmth would follow. A flicker of flame as a guide into darkness. These slow rituals may seem dry by modern standards, but they mattered. The rhythms of ancient life depended on repetition. Light the fire. Feed it. Sleep near it. Wake beside it. Cook. Bless. Repeat. Hestia was not only the goddess of the hearth, but of order. Not the order of law or battle ranks, but the smaller, more enduring kind. The quiet cadence of daily habit, and maybe that's why she eventually left Olympus. Yes, Hestia voluntarily gave up her seat among the 12 Olympians so that Dionysus could join. That story is rarely told in detail, but the symbolism is rich. Here is a goddess so content with her place, so confident in her quiet power, that she stepped back for the sake of harmony. You might picture it now: Zeus, flanked by loud gods, arguing about who should go. Hera insists she has too many duties. Apollo strums a disapproving chord. Ares starts sharpening a spear, just in case, and there's Hestia, rising gently, folding her simple robe and saying, "Let him have it." She returned to her fire. Not offended, not forgotten, just present. And so from then on, while the Olympian roster changed to suit the dramas of the day, Hestia remained at the center of things, quietly watching, warmly waiting. Was hers the greatest power of all, the ability to remain essential while stepping out of the spotlight? The eternal flame and the forgotten goddess. You've likely heard tales of Zeus's thunderbolts, Aphrodite's beauty, and Poseidon's sea, raging fury. But how often do we speak of the fire that warmed their halls? Of the steady glow that outlasted tempests, quarrels, and triumphs? Hestia's story ends not in grand battles or tragic exile, but in the glowing ember that never quite dies. And in a way, that makes her legacy one of the longest, lasting among the Olympians by the time classical Athens had reached its golden age. Pericles' speeches, Socrates' questions, and marble temples rising under a sunlit sky, the rituals of Hestia remained unchanged. Even in bustling cities, amidst commerce, politics, and war, the small rituals endured. Each newlywed couple began their marriage by lighting their shared hearth, dedicating the union to Hestia. Each colony founded across the Mediterranean lit its civic fire from a flame carried by hand or ship from the mother city. Even if those cities fought one another in war, their hearths burned with a shared origin, quiet symbols of unity hidden Inside stone ovens, Hestia didn't just tend literal fire. She was the idea of fire kept alive, not for destruction, but for continuity. The fire that welcomes. The fire that waits. The fire that remembers, in some old fragments from Hellenistic poets. Dusty lines not often taught in schools. There's a recurring image, a hooded figure sitting beside a fire while the rest of Olympus argues in the background. The poem never names her, but the implication is clear. She is serenity in the face of vanity, warmth in a world of storms, and yet, by the Roman era, Hestia began to fade from public memory. The Romans had their own version of her, Vesta, and in some ways, she received even more formal reverence. The Vestal Virgins, priestesses tasked with keeping Vesta's flame alive, became figures of both admiration and fear. Their vow of chastity was tied to the symbolic purity of the flame. If the fire went out, it was a dire omen. The punishment for letting it die? Severe. Vesta had temples, attendants, sacred calendars, but the essence remained the same. In every Roman house, a fire still burned in her honor, so even as Hestia's Greek name became less spoken, her influence glowed on. There's something peculiar about the way she endures, not through temples or battles, but through gestures. The turning of bread in a pan, the lighting of a lamp at dusk, a bowl placed before the flame, an act of quiet intention. Archaeologists often find domestic hearths in ruins of ancient homes, burned patches of stone, blackened earth, soot-streaked clay ovens. To most, they're just remnants of cooking. But to the Greeks, they were sacred spaces. Altars without ornament. In that sense, the ruins of Hestia's worship are everywhere. Hidden in plain sight, one unearthed inscription from a modest Delian home reads, "May Hestia take the chill from our bones." Another, found carved inside a courtyard wall, simply says, "We burn because she burns." Over time her name may have faded, but the concept of the hearth, the idea of a central spiritual flame lived on. Medieval monasteries carried the tradition in candlelight vigils. Peasant homes across Europe echoed the same pattern. A fire at the center, meals shared beside it, silence observed around its glow. Even in today's world, there are echoes. Think of the flickering kitchen light that stays on for a child getting home late, the scented candle burning beside a bath, the single flame of a birthday cake, the campfire that draws strangers closer. These rituals may not call her name, but they carry her breath. Hestia is the goddess who asked for nothing. No shrine, no statue, no saga of war. And yet she received everything, every home, every hearth, every quiet moment of care. You could argue that she represents the soft infrastructure of human civilization, the glue of custom, the warmth of routine, the sacredness of small things. Perhaps the real reason Hestia never started wars was that she never needed to. She waited. She watched. And slowly, one meal, one fire, one whispered blessing at a time, she shaped the world not by force, but by familiarity. In a way, she still sits in the corner of every room where people gather. Still watching, still warming, still refusing to ask for praise. And maybe, just maybe, when your house feels most like a home, when it's quiet and steady and the kettle hums on the stove, you've met her too. Thank you for spending this quiet moment in history with us. If you enjoyed drifting through the gentle details of the past, please consider supporting the channel by clicking like, sharing it with someone who might need a peaceful story tonight, and subscribing to Quiet Boring Sleep for more softly told tales of forgotten times. Until next time, may your tea stay warm, your thoughts stay slow, and your dreams wander gently through the past. Good night.